never mind. I got my answer. Hey guys,
Exactly.
so nice seeing you again. Nice seeing you, Stefan. Hope you've been doing well. I hope that the air, the atmosphere behind you is not too thin, and that you're seeing the stars. I love your background.
Look, this is Mauna Kea in Hawaii.
It's
Um,
Hawaii, okay.
I took that photo myself, by the way, and
Really?
I thought it's a nice background because I always reach out to the stars.
Well said.
Impressive.
I love astronomy. I love astrophotography. I wish I had an inkling of talent to take nice pictures of the stars and the galaxies. So I am very envious of your background.
So maybe you're aware, just one last sentence about the Stephan's quintet. See, there's 5 galaxies out there named by me, so that's nice.
Really?
Yep.
Very cool.
I'm not sure that they meant me by Stefan, but that's a different story.
Yeah, exactly. Who cares, right? You'll take it any way you can. Well, nice seeing you again. We have a quiet Andrea on the other side
Yeah,
of
but I'm
the.
not here listening to you. Unlike you, I'm not specifically passionate about stars and things, you know. There's something that divides us, passion for science fiction. I think you're on the Star Wars side, I'm on the Terminator side. You see, I'm a younger
On
hot.
the
And
what side?
what's sorry?
On the what
On
side did you
on
say?
Terminator side, you know, you Star Wars
Terminator.
and yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
And
So I'm
of
a
the
fan of
whale stuff.
Barbie. Exactly. So great to see you, by the way, Stefan, again after the last year's engagement. It was a very cool one with Pamela. So great to talk to you again. Eric, maybe you can start first question to Stefan, or should I go first? I'll let you introduce yourself, Stefan, again to this to the audience of this meetings, these talks that we have been running for now second years. Proved to be quite successful, quite impactful. That was a goal at the beginning. So I'll leave it on to you.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here with you again. Looking forward to our talk today. Just a quick intro about myself. Actually, I was a C-suite level manager from the first day of my work career because I started off with my own company when I left university. And that was back then in the 90s. You would call it today a cloud service provider for finance, for brokerage. Um, these, these,
Interesting.
terms, these terms were not used back then. My company got acquired by a very large American firm, IDC. They're now part of ICE, the big exchange. And I became the CTO for the global group um, due to the fact that I had this internet experience from the 90s already, right? From there, I moved on to Live. I was 10 years the CEO of the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation. And I stepped down in June this year. And right now, I'm the chair of the industry advisory group to International Chambers Digital Standards Initiative. And that's all about paperless trade. So hopefully we can talk about that a lot today.
Absolutely. So first thing first, Stefan, we have, by the way, somebody that is collaborating with DSI, I think with DSI, with you sort of recalling with Harief Mandya from South Africa. So we had a perspective of down under, let's say, and in the Black Continent, which is quickly developing. Uh, Let us know what's going on in terms of digital standards and what's the status of the work nowadays. How's it progressing, the adoption of the standards, and what's going to be the future for it?
When you when you look at it first from the 10,000 feet perspective, um, everybody talks about digital transformation, going digital, digital workflows and everything else. But computers are around there for the last 50 years. So this is not just about using computers for something that everybody does already. In my opinion, this is about taking all the workflows and processes across companies and countries apart and reassemble them in a completely new way, if you like. And when you want to do this, you need 3 elements. And the DSI initiative is taking care of all 3. Number one, the legal situation is different in each country in the world. So, for instance, there are lots of countries where a wet signature on paper is still required when you, for instance, file a customs report or something like that. So there's a legal reform around the UN Model Law of Exchange of Trade Records, MLETR. And DSI is very much advocating this. We run a group of experts there. And on the website, you will find a tracker that shows the progress in all these countries, you know, from beginner down to fully adoption, like in the UK and other countries. So that's number one. You need to look at the legal situation. Number two, when you talk about computer-to-computer transactions across companies, across networks, you need to think about standards, data standards predominantly. So we're talking about machine-readable data and the standards, therefore. And again, the DSI initiative took on the role to, you know, review all the standards and come up with a very nice document for the key trade documents and data element types, where we say there are roughly 36 different document types that are mainly in use in trade and supply chain and trade finance. Not all of them have been fully digitalized. Not all of them have machine readable versions of them. So there are a bunch of, you know, documents that are fully, you know, machine readable version. EBL is the latest, you know, addition to that. And there are others that are sort of in the making, and there are other document types, like 8 of them, that have not been, you know, looked after yet. The only issue is, you know, this joke about you look at something and then you find 14 standards, and what do? You create a 15th one to bridge them all. The same happens here. So I'm very grateful that DSI did not attempt to become a standards body themselves, but what they highlight now is that these standards, you know, do not speak the same language. A data field, you know, going down into the weeds, a data field in this standard might be, for the same data element, might be named completely differently than in another standard. Then you have different formats, different encodings, different field lengths, all these kind of things we need to look into. And I could imagine that DSI is also taking on this role in the future to look more into the standardization, harmonization across standards.
The big joke is, going back to your joke, the joke we had at TC 307 was, is blockchain one word or two? And it took them 2 years to decide it was one word, right?
That's also a good one. Yes, I didn't know that. So the third aspect, that touch base is more on the work that, you know, we are usually working on, you know, on the digital side, is when you have computer-to-computer data exchange, you need to think of different ways of providing trust. And just ring fencing architectures, ring fencing networks, you know, doing IP checks and firewalls and all these kinds of things are not good enough anymore. If a fraudster, if a hacker has the chance to break into a system, to manipulate people, to provide access and things like that, once they're in, they can do everything. And the number of fraud attacks and everything else is going through the roof right now. So fraud is becoming another big threat to the global economy, in my opinion, if we continue this way. And if you allow me this comment, with AI, it's getting even worse, because it's much easier, much cheaper to fake content now, and it's much harder to determine whether it's real or not. So
almost impossible on the present stage.
Almost impossible unless you build the trust into it right from the beginning. And then we're right into things like cryptography, you know, digital signing, digital identity, and all these kind of things. And the DSI, again, took the initiative to collect and assemble all the standards there and made them understandable by using some use cases and examples on how trust can be provided. And I was the chair of the working group who provided this document, Trust in Trade. And the funny thing is, when we talk about trust, we actually recommend zero trust architectures, but maybe we have a chance later to talk about these latest developments.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've been hearing about zero trust. So, I mean, if you want to touch on this topic, feel free to immediately, Stephan. It's interesting, by the way. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Just from my experience, when you talk with computer scientists who are into crypto and stuff like that, for them, this is cool. This is all, what they understand. But when you talk with business people, with legal people, when I talk with my mother at home, and I would say, we want to achieve a zero trust environment, people would look at me like, what are you talking about, right? We want more trust, not less trust. And this is why we recommended to take the term trust and break it up again into three buckets. Number one is the law. In each country, you have certainty in certain cases simply by the law. If, for instance, EIDAS in Europe is in place, you can really trust the digital signature that comes with a qualified signature or qualified e-seal. But that's in the law. Below, and that provides a lot of trust. There are countries where you can really trust that what you're doing is court-proof, and you can mitigate things and so on and so forth. All the things that are not regulated in the law or the regulation requires governance frameworks. And governance is a very important, very strategic aspect, which, in my opinion, is not looked at deeply enough by many, many people, right? They believe they just have to build a system and then they run it and then it's fine. No, governance is a really big issue. And there, if you have a good governance framework, which is transparent and open and everything else, then people start to develop trust in the organizations, in the people behind, and so on and so forth. And then you go on the computer-to-computer level, machine-to-machine level, and there you say, never trust, always verify, right? And that is where the zero trust comes in, which was zero trust is only on the computational level. While with legal and governance requirements, we also want to tackle the trust that people have to build into systems, into countries, into platforms.
You touched on a very important topic, a core one actually, Stephan. For your information, we started out with this Big Impact Talks in January 2023, and unsurprisingly, the very first topic that we touched was governance models and the reasons why some of the blockchain-related ventures failed in delivering, in having, let's say, scalable application in the real world. It's useless to name all these experiences, all these ventures. Everybody knows, by the way, at least in our ground. Governance. Why is it so, let's say, under looked, and what could be done? And besides this, we'd love to understand why all these ventures that we talk about failed, because it's real reality. Let's make it clear. What about governance? Why is it so important? And why did all projects fail in setting up a successful governance model?
A very personal opinion on that matter. So I'm not speaking for anybody else. I'm not speaking for anybody else here. I got my first digital certificate like 26 years ago. We did this for, SMIME, signing emails and stuff like that. And at that point in time, there was no infrastructure. So we created the certificates ourselves. Later, when TLS came around and you use certificates also for encryption on the internet, we populated our web servers with TLS certificates. And that worked very well until someone said, this is not trustworthy. If everyone can do their own thing, right, how can we trust the system? And it was actually the private sector, many, many years before the public sector. It was the private sector who came up with the idea of creating a framework that is open, transparent, and standardized. And the folks who did this were the browser vendors, the Microsoft, Google's, Mozilla's, and so on, and the certificate authorities. And they created a forum called the CAP Forum. And in that CAP Forum, you'll find documents that define precisely what a certificate is, for what purpose, how it's going to be issued, what kind of vetting is going to take place, and all these kind of things, you know. And all of this is part of governance. So if you are on the internet and you see in the URL HTTPS in your Google browser, then you have a much higher degree of certainty that someone has looked after this. Now, this is a private sector initiative, and the enforcement, governance always comes also with enforcement. In this particular case, is done by the browser vendors. So if a certificate authority, for instance, does something wrong consistently, it happened in the past that the browser vendors turned them off and said, look, we're not accepting your certificates anymore. And that basically means this authority goes out of business, right? Now, later, and I think that's the birth of the IDAS in Europe, for instance, governments thought that leaving that to multinational large IT companies is not good enough. We need a level of trust in the law. And they created the IDAS regulation, the IDAS 1, using digital certificates for that. And again, they came up with all these descriptions and all these rules and everything else on how to build, how to use those certificates. And we're now with the IDAS 2 and what's going on with the browser vendors at a time when you see more and more European certificates being used in TLS communication. The browser vendors are, you know, have been asked to support them. And all of this was only possible because it was so transparent. You know precisely the rule, you know how audits take place of certificate authorities and so on and so forth. Now, if you translate this into a larger picture of paperless trade, then you can imagine that you need all kinds of governance frameworks for maybe different industries, different technology, different consortia, and so on and so forth. But they all should be open and transparent so that people can review and see what's going on. And we at Life back then decided to use the trust over IP governance framework for creating a governance framework for the digital LEI, the digital legal entity identifier. And over those 2 years where we built this and got reviewed by the folks at Trust over IP and everything else, we learned how important it is to be as transparent as possible about the way you do things and the way people interact with each other, in order to give people this level of comfort and certainty about what's going on.
It's absolutely very interesting, Stefan. Uh, you have deep knowledge, by the way, in this kind of new technologies. You mentioned one thing that is cool to me, because I'm dealing with this new thing called LEI. Uh, I see lots of scattered information in the environment, utilizers, mainly. What this is about, what are the benefits of having LEI, and what's the impact on our industry, on trade, namely, because I see, dig down into it, I see huge advantages. Let's make it clear on what this is and how can companies, especially, leverage on the power of LEI.
I have an anecdote for you on this one. I use my mother for this. If I would tell my mother that I'm going to build up a new company, you know, we're building rockets, sending them to the stars, and then we land them on a pontoon on the sea, and that's where we make money because it's cheaper, my mother would say, yeah, I get that. But she's not a rocket scientist. She has absolutely no clue how it works. But we all have seen Star Wars, Star Trek, and so on. Everybody believes, you know, that they understand this. If I go and tell my mother what an LEI is, she would not understand at all. Because for her, there is no problem. She can go shopping, she can use her credit card, she can do all kinds of transactions on the internet and so on and so forth, even at her age. And why identity is a problem would not be logical to her, right? So we're talking about something that is a little bit lower in the plumbing, if you like, of the systems, because when you talk with people who are concerned with identity, then you hear all the complaints about the complexity there and so on and so forth. And when we talk about identity for corporates, it's getting even worse. Corporate identity is usually granted by organizations such as business registries or tax registries and stuff like that. Each country does it differently. Each registry does it differently. The allocation rules are different. The quality rules are different. The data sets are different. So if you want to build an IT system where you want to know whom you're doing business with, then you have to really learn and adopt all these country-specific issues into your system, and that's not sustainable in the long run. And in the finance industry, this led to a big disaster. You remember 2008, the Lehman collapse? Nobody had a clue who was actually touched there and how much money we're talking about. And that is why the financial regulators, unfortunately, just the financial regulators, the others have not done the same yet, where the financial regulators said, we need above and beyond the national identity schemes, a global identity scheme, so that a company from Japan can be recognized in Finland, even though people do not speak each other's language. So we need a kind of standard, we need some kind of tooling and everything else so that people would have a clue whom they're doing business with. And that was the birth of the LEI system in 2012. And later it was enhanced by ownership information so that you not only know whom you're doing business with, but you also know who owns, which company owns the ones you're doing business with. Let me give you an example. You run an RFP, you get 3 proposals. If you don't know that those 3 proposals actually goes to the same parent company, you're doomed, right? So you should know that better. And that's what the LEI system is for. And it's like a global business register in the end. It's that simple, right? But a digital version of it was also needed. And maybe we have a chance to talk about that in a second.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to. To me, having professionals like you going deep down into these arguments, topics is pure gold, Stefan. And you mentioned something really impactful here. It's just to me, having an NDI is just having uh, wholly the history of a company there available for you to transact with those entities. So it's like laying down the ground for steady, seamless transactions. And that's what, even more than blockchain, honestly speaking, uh, the impact is much bigger in terms of technology. And this comes back. You mentioned sustainable that business. Sustainability to me means also resilience. So we touched on EDOS, identity, touching on LEI, and the U is shining in this side by side, maybe with UK, third, DORA Act. How is this going to impact our industry, trade, namely, but also finance, because we're talking about trade finance, supply chain finance. How is this going to be impactful for trade and trade finance, Stefan?
To put a little bit of water into the wine, I do not believe that the trade world, the supply chain world, the trade finance world is very much, digitalized yet. When you ask people in companies, do you still use paper? No, we have computers. We use our SAP system, Microsoft systems, whatever kind of ERP system and others. But the moment you want to transfer data from one company to the other, then all of a sudden it's done by PDFs, by faxes, or by even paper in letter.
I was told I use PDF. Why should I use blockchain? Full stop.
Exactly. And sending a PDF by email is so convenient. It's so easy, right? People get used to that. And if you're a little bit more advanced, you provide an API so that people can fetch the PDF from you. What people don't see is the complexity that lies then in the interpretation of the data. Since the data in the PDF is not machine readable, then all of a sudden you start struggling with interpreting documents coming from different sources and so on and so forth, right? People now believe that AI is the answer. But I have serious doubts because the false positives and the false negatives in detection, need to be addressed. And the easier way, even for AI algorithms to do something meaningful, would be to have data standards for that. And that touch bases on what I said with the DSI initiative. We need to name those data standards, and we need to convince the industry to adopt those data standards. And that is what's now starting to happen. Now, some people are front running this. There are, highly sophisticated solutions out there. GSBN network, for instance, or WaveBL just signed up with Glyph to use the LEI on their ledger.
Yeah.
So it's now starting. These are pockets, but let's be fair. This is not mainstream yet. Mainstream are the big guys, and it will take a little bit of time more to see this happening everywhere.
Very good point, Stefan. Would love to understand. You saw what's happened during the last year. 2023 was the year of UK showing up with UTVA, the Final Act, because of the entity and the impact of common law in trade worldwide. It's big one indeed. 2024, France interjecting its own national law, the MLETR. Next, Germany is going to enter the space. Can you shed a light on what's going on in Germany and what the impact in this? I tell you honestly, being in touch with the stakeholders all around the world, both from the UK side, both on the French side, it's like having two different approaches. One having there's a clash towards the other, not collaborating totally, and lacking collaboration is already a flaw in my own eyes, honestly speaking, for being successful. So, what's the reaction or the action further on in Germany? How is it stepping in the arena of digital trade?
I think UK, among others, set a very nice example by adopting Milliliter in their national law. But when you listen to what British politicians say, they want to become some kind of an independent trading hub, in, with Europe and everything. They need these kind of things, and that's not a surprise that they were really front running the whole thing. I know that France is much advanced. Other countries from South America to Asia are also in the mix there, and Germany is among those. But everybody struggles with how to implement it, right? The law has now a set of requirements laid out that all must be fulfilled in order to be able to use digital documents in court cases, for instance, right, or in arbitration cases. And people are now struggling with the way how to implement this. And again, some countries are more advanced than others. From my experience, when I seen so many different countries in the world, when you look at Asia, for instance, it's unbelievable actually how much technology and how much digital adoption they already have in their systems. Yet they are completely different than what we are doing from a governance, from a legal, from a political point of view. But they have taken on this very well. So one good example is Singapore, where everything is digital. You have your SingPass, you have your ComPass, you have your trust rate network, and so on and so forth. So these countries are more advanced, and they are also struggling. They're not struggling with their own implementation. They're struggling in making the rest of the world connect to it. The term interoperability comes into the play. And then all of a sudden, when you have multiple platforms and interoperability, then you fall back to very, very important legal questions like how can you prove that a digital object really belongs to you and not anybody else, right? Singularity is the buzzword there. So that's the current situation. But talking about Germany, Germany is in many cases on the public sector side so much behind. They have to do so many more things in order to get digital. So It needs to be seen how fast this is going to happen, right? The most likely situation is, like in many other countries, is that people start to build their single window applications from customs point of view in trade. But then you have 200 single windows. What is single about that, right? Coming back
It's
to the
no longer single.
yeah,
It's
so we're at the we're in the infancy here. Digitalization is something that everybody wants, everybody needs to have it, right, for multiple reasons, but we struggle in bringing the whole world onto this path. And some are faster, some are slower, but they all struggle with the implementation.
the lower level, Stefan. We talk about countries, legislation, but at a level, industry level, Stefan, we saw, I mean, personally, get involved in this shift world. We see a lot of resistance in the industry itself. And it's kind of funny. It's kind of incredible to me, honestly speaking, because the need is there. It's evident. And it comes out of 2020 with the pandemic, which is the first episode. Uh, it's a it's an ancient industry trade that needs to be modernized heavily. Why so much resistance at this lower level? I see the shift, legal level, technical one. But then again, if you think that we talked to Javier, I told you we're hitting 3.6% in terms of EPLs. It's been going on for years and years now. Why such poor result? I mean, I'm not asking you for the truth. Your honest opinion, honestly. I got mine. You have yours, man. It's more qualified for sure.
Um, let's see it more positively. We now have, with the Fit Alliance and an organization as such, for the first time, many market movers, who want to go into the digitalization of bill of ladings. And you know this 25 by 25. So that there is a
Yeah.
real goal for 2030 to have 25% of all BVLs in digital form from 25 companies. So that's the positive side, right? The adoption rate that you're referring to has more to do with the fundamental economic problem that we're all facing. And in economic theory, this is called network effects. While everybody believes that there will be positive effects and benefits for all of us if we go digital, it's faster, cheaper, less fraud, and you name it, right? You can only achieve your goal if your counterparties do the same. So, and now you have the situation where one side waits for the other. Nobody wants to be the first mover. Nobody wants to make mistakes, right? I mentioned already the banks are pretty much also in the mix with their trade finance. They need all the documentation. And they simply say, as long as the law is not digital, right? As long as we need paper, forget it, give us the paper and we need to operate on that. So it is a very interesting situation. How can we overcome these issues that arise from network effects? We want all parties to move into the same direction, hopefully at the same speed, without the sensation of people waiting for the other side to do something. And then you need the vendors. And there are just a few handful of large data software vendors for this, right? It's 100, 150 companies in the world that have 95% market share. And for those vendors, they also need the demand from the customers to change their applications. I mean, what we're asking the vendors for is to open up their systems, right? To be more transparent, to be more open, to be more interoperable with their competitors, right?
We go way back to where we started from, trust, interoperability.
Yeah, exactly.
I need to understand now, Stefan, from a technical point of view, to me, we head in the right direction in terms of interoperability, meaning that two entities speak the same language. Technically, where are we with this? What's the stages with this magic finding word? Because in my opinion, it's a big move to have interoperable systems. Damn, that's the key in setting up a very scattered picture.
May I to share with you a view that I'm developing at the moment. So I wouldn't say everything is, clearly formulated, well thought through, but maybe to give you a few ideas of what we are thinking at the moment. Digitalization means, as I said, technical computers have to exchange data with each other. Now, how do you do that? Most, if not all, in the industry, the legacy providers, as well as the latest blockchains, they all claim the use me, and then everything is solved. Come to my platform. I have everything sorted for you, right? It's completely safe, privacy,
All
no
magic
problem,
words,
right?
reach prices and cozy on everything.
Absolutely.
You're
It's so easy to integrate into your workflows. And to some degree, this is true. Some people have really built smart applications and smart platforms for this purpose. But let's face it, the whole world is never ever going to agree on one single platform, right? Europeans want to do their own thing. The Americans wouldn't choose something from China and vice versa. So just pure logic says that we're not going to have one platform. That means we have to live with very many platforms. And that comes back to the question of interoperability. If it's just a data exchange layer, some kind of API, then you do not fulfill the requirements from the law, from the Medita law. So, and I think there's an empty space the technology has not addressed yet. Now, our idea is, learning from other examples, is that we should not think so much in platforms or distributed ledgers and things like that. We should think of whole decentralization peer-to-peer, and that requires a trade protocol between people. So we need actually a standard, a protocol that is not owned by anybody, that is not, controlled by anybody, to allow for interoperability. And I would like to give you an example where this has happened at large scale and in an enormous quick time, and that was the internet itself. Remember AOL, CompuServe, these kind of big platforms to provide all the services. Now, with at CERN with Tim Berners-Lee inventing HTTP and HTML, all of a sudden, boom, right? Everybody could work with everyone else, even though they have completely different technology, different servers, different everything, but they could communicate with each other. And that is today the backbone of the entire world. Everyone uses the internet based on those standards. Yeah. So we need trade standards. It's a little bit more complicated because now all of a sudden you talk about payload and stuff like that as well. But in our humble opinion, this is the only way that could solve this issue at a large scale.
This is real gold to me, Stephan, because I usually avoid talking about trade with platforms. I use ecosystem and ecosystems at a lower level. So it's a much larger ecosystem that embodies many different ecosystems. I'm not a technical guy, of course, so your perspective is much higher than mine. But I do really like the concept and would love to dig deeper into this as time goes by. So this requires you to be sitting here with me and really further on, maybe during next year, early next year, following up what's going on in space. One final thought about technology. We touched on many technology during this call. What's going to be the defining one? What's going to be the one that wins the race, if any, of course?
Let me try to give you an interesting thought that that you can use, for yourself thinking it through, and maybe for the audience of this recording as well. Food for thought. If you build an application, what you do is you have a data model, you build your database management, blah, 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 everything around. And then later you attach, user rights and access roles and stuff like that. That means by definition, each platform is incompatible with the other. Because the data might be exchangeable, but not the authority and not the roles, not the identity and all these kinds of things. So the idea must be to have an ID-centric view on building an ecosystem rather than a data-centric view. The data can be attached easily to ID. If you know that the company A owns a certain digital object, right? Then you want to make this information transparent in all workflows, in all ecosystems and everything else. So we need standards. And I'm making a little bit the pitch here for the VLAI. You need standards that are completely decentralized in their application to have some kind of, what people invented as the self-sovereign identity piece. I want to own my credentials and I want to use it, whether it's this platform, that platform, or that platform. And if the industry could agree on something like that, I think we would have a major step, taken a major step forward.
Amazing. This is really amazing thought to conclude this talk with you, Stephan. I mean, this is just let's say the very first step that we plant into the soil. Thanks for being with us, by the way. I take that as a very first step towards a much larger picture in the future, Stephan. This is real gold. I'll share with my contacts, the people that I talk to, and with the people that I collaborate with on the technical side, because I think that collaborating at multiple level is the winning move for achieving what you mentioned. Uh, Really great thought, and I can only thank you for being with us. Can I have you promise to be with us again in the future, in the coming months? I would love to share more insights with you. Really thankful for what you did today.
Love to. When you work so much on these, hard nuts that are hard to crack, sometimes you also want to talk with people about this and get feedback and everything else. So I use this as a channel for feedback as well. If someone would like to discuss this further or has a different thought or an idea, we should have this as a bilateral channel.
Amazing. You have news from us, by the way. Thanks, Stephan. That was amazing. And thanks for being with us, sharing insights. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you
Thank
again,
you.
and goodbye.
Goodbye.